Alright, so before this video can begin, let's just talk very briefly about the current situation. Before this whole lockdown happened, I did record one video and I don't really like it very much because I think I rushed it because I knew that lockdown was coming. So I don't have a massive backlog of videos like most YouTubers seem to have already sorted out for themselves. That makes them a lot more intelligent than I am, but fortunately enough for me, I knew that I can make loads of my videos sitting here in my bedroom, on my computer, all that kind of stuff, so it doesn't really impact me that badly. The content that is affected by this though is the Pointless Polo project, the Mod of Miata Madness, the Road to Racing, all that stuff basically where I go outside and work on my cars or take my cars to places is impacted. So just a forewarning for this little period of time, there won't be videos on those kinds of topics. However sad that makes me because I've got a lot of plans for what I want to achieve this year, like getting my racing license, all that kind of stuff. Please do, as the government suggests, stay home, only go out for your shopping or for your exercise. I'm gonna go for a run after I've recorded this video because I'm trying to do running every single day to keep myself fit and healthy during these quite difficult times. Keep safe out there. All my love to you and your family. I hope that you're all doing very well, and let's get into the actual video. How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm talking about a topic that has plagued me for quite some time. On Friday, I put out a video where I basically ran through 6 quite fast first cars that 17-year-olds can get insured on. I found nice cheap quotes, I found nice cheap cars, and they're all pretty much insurable for 17-year-olds at pretty reasonable prices. I've also done plenty of videos on cheap and fast cars for young drivers in the past, including even, I suppose, my MX-5. It's not horrendously fast, but it's fast enough, and I'm a young driver. I fall into the young driver category, so clearly I'm into fast cars for young drivers. But one comment I often get is, should you be driving a fast car as your first car? I wanted to take this point and run with it as a video, so remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Without further ado, let's find out whether you should have a fast first car. Now, before we can even probably begin with this topic, we have to understand the fact that insurers make it quite difficult for you, a young driver, to get into any kind of car, let alone a fast car. Generally, insurers try to base their quotes on statistics and data, and often that data says that young drivers are more dangerous or more risky for them to insure, so they charge you higher prices so that if things do go wrong, they get their money back. It's as simple as that. However, I'm also quite certain that with cars that have less data on them, for example, there probably aren't very many 17-year-olds driving Lamborghinis, they would still give you a very high insurance quote simply because they don't want you to drive that car. And that's because young drivers aged 17 to 24 make up around 7% of all license holders who drive their cars on the road, and yet they also make up 20% of all the drivers altogether that have been killed or seriously injured in accidents year on year. Now, insurers don't like paying out for death, and they really don't like paying out for serious injuries, hence our prices end up going really high. I turned 25 this year, so finally I can get into slightly cheaper insurance brackets. So with all that in mind, that's one of the key reasons why they make our prices so high. And don't get me wrong, I hate it. I also don't agree with it. I also don't think it's really based on true logic or stats or facts, but either way, it's a fact of life. We all have to deal with how grim insurance prices are, and some more than others depending on where you live, etc. Now, of course, when it comes to defining what a fast car is, or particularly a fast first car, it's a sliding scale. You're not going to get yourself a car that does sub 4 seconds 0 to 60 as your first car here in the UK, just because most of those cars cost a shed load of money and cost even more to insure if you can even bother trying to get insured on them. In my last video, you'll have seen that all of the cars fit between 8 to 10 seconds in terms of their 0 to 60 times. And relative to my first car, which had an 18-second 0 to 60 as a 1.2 litre 64 brake horsepower Skoda Fabia Estate, they're fast. Relative to a Ferrari 458, they're not that fast. But then a 458 relative to a Chiron isn't that fast either, so as you can see, it's all relative. Let me just interrupt myself for a second here. I'm talking a lot about my Polo, my MX-5, and my Skoda Fabia Estate. If you want to see more of those 3 cars, go check out my Instagram account at carswithjb. Drop me a follow. I'm trying to hit 3,000 followers this year, so it'd really help me out. And there are videos on all 3 of those cars here on my YouTube channel. So if you enjoy this kind of content and enjoy weekly videos through this very difficult time of our existence, hit the subscribe button. Really helps the channel out. You're a legend. Let's get back to talking about fast first cars. But one good thing about fast versus slow is that generally insurers are more interested in the engine sizes and that kind of stuff of a car rather than necessarily its 0 to 60 times. So as I showed in that video last week, it isn't impossible as a 17-year-old to get a fast car, but should you get one? Let's look at the benefits of buying a fast car as your first car. Oftentimes fast cars do look quite good. For example, if you bought the Skoda Fabia VRS, it's a lot nicer looking looking car, in my opinion, and in many people's opinion, I assume, than a normal Skoda Fabia. It's slightly more sporty looking, it's got some slightly better looking features, it's got nicer seats, a better interior. As a general experience, the car is nicer. Not always the way, but generally faster cars are going to sound better as well. For example, I've seen 17-year-olds get insured on MX-5s as their first cars, and if you compare the sound of this to the sound of that, I know which one I'd choose, but obviously preferences are preferences, and maybe you prefer the hum of the 1.2 versus the rasp of the 1.8. Also, to an extent, buying a faster car can be more fun, of course. You can get out in the car, you can blip it away from traffic lights, you can blip it around corners better. Often, faster cars are given better suspension, better all those things. I don't need to explain this to you, you're watching a car channel, you probably know these things in the first place. But ultimately, they tend to provide a better driving experience. For example, the Toyota Yaris T-Sport that I included in that video has better suspension, upgraded brakes, upgraded all sorts of stuff to make sure that your driving experience is better. It shouldn't feel as wallowy, it shouldn't feel as wet and loose and kind of rubbish. That was a strange set of words to put together to describe a car, but we will carry on. There's also just being a car enthusiast as well. I found it a lot easier to fall in love with my MX-5 than I did my Polo. My Polo took years of building a relationship with and understanding how it drives and doing stuff to it and making it fun. Whereas with my MX-5, the first time I drove it, I was like, this is nuts. I really enjoy this. So from an enthusiast perspective, you get a lot more out of that slightly faster and more complete package. But not saying that you won't get that from a slower package, but you might just have to put in more time and more effort. As well as all of that, of course, street cred. Your mates are going to think it's sick if you drive a faster car. Although it doesn't always work with girls. My girlfriend is not a massive fan of sitting in my MX-5. She hates the bucket seat, she hates the harnesses. One day we're going to do a video together where I can just literally let her complain on screen for 15 minutes about how rubbish it is to be inside my MX-5. And the final benefit I wanted to discuss with fast first cars was longevity. If it comes as your first car and it's quick, it's fast, it handles well, it's a really good package, you don't necessarily need to upgrade quite as soon to something else. You won't get as bored of it as quickly, or at least I'd hope you wouldn't. Of course, we know that's not necessarily the way, but I'm just talking about generally as an idea. But now let's compare that to driving something slightly slower. As proven in lots of my videos that I've done so far on cheap first cars with cheap insurance, it's often not that difficult to get cheap quotes without a black box on slow first cars. Now, for those of you that don't know what black boxes are, here in the UK, lots of young drivers have to have them on their first cars, where it tracks their speed, the G-force they take around corners, basically shows a rating of how good a driver they are, or how safe a driver they are. That can then be used to dictate their next year's insurance quotes. It does mean that at all times you're following the speed limits, you're taking corners nice and slowly, you're not really pushing the car, although I've heard of a lot of people who push the boundaries with their black boxes and still get perfect driver ratings, so I don't really know how they work, if I'm perfectly honest. But it does beg the question, why would you even bother getting a fast first car when you'll inevitably be forced to drive it with a black box, when instead you could just buy a slow car and get it with no black box and drive however you want to. I mean, even if you drive both cars exactly the same way, you won't have that little thing hanging over your head knowing that if you do something wrong, you might get in trouble. And by the way, I'm well aware of the fact that you can also get quotes on some faster first cars without black boxes as well. It isn't impossible, you can do it, but it just is slightly more difficult. I mentioned it sort of in the fast first cars, but there's an upgrade point here as well. If you've got a 1.2 litre engine and you're doing 0 to 60 in 18 seconds, when you upgrade from that to sub 10 seconds, it's going to feel like a massive jump. And then when you upgrade from that to sub 7 seconds, it will feel like a big jump again. And you get that sort of progression of levels rather than just coming in sort of midway into that and then not really feeling the same levels of jump. This is a point that I don't necessarily agree with, but something that I should mention regardless. Road speed is generally the same in pretty much every car you're going to drive. If you're driving through a city and you're in traffic and you're doing 5 miles per hour, you're going to be doing 5 miles per hour in a slow car or a fast car, and the performance of that fast car is just never going to get tested. However, that's kind of a debate against all cars, to be perfectly honest, because you could debate that at any point in time. The purpose of the car is not necessarily to be fast, but it's sometimes nice to have a car that can go fast. Theoretically, but not statistically, it's less dangerous, but only to an extent. There's a point at which having a slow car can be quite dangerous at times because you might not be able to get yourself out of a sticky situation, but I do feel like in my MX-5, there's a lot more opportunity to have sticky situations than in my Polo. The Polo just won't get to the speeds quickly enough to be that dangerous, whereas the MX-5, I can get to those speeds, the back can slide out, all sorts of nonsenses can happen because it's quicker. Running costs as well. A slow car often brings with it very good running costs, like minimal tax, minimal petrol or diesel costs, and obviously the low insurance quotes as well, as I mentioned before. But the one thing that is particularly important to me in a first car, and the reason why I would suggest that you buy a slow, average, whatever first car, is the story. I absolutely adored my Fabia estate. It was literally everything to me. As a first car, it meant the whole world because all I wanted to do was drive a car. I got the car, I drove it, I loved it. I did not care that it was slow. Of course, it had all sorts of problems, but ultimately it was my car and I loved it to bits. I even did a video on how good that car was to me. The link should be up in the iCard somewhere around here. And similarly with my Polo 9N, again, another classic first car, 1.2 litre, I've done loads of modifications to it, and that's really helped me to invest myself into the car. Now, I'm not saying you can't get that kind of story in a fast car, but if you buy a car with the intention of exclusively having this fast thing, I think you miss out on the potential fun that you might have by building a story with that car. If you told me I had to sell my MX-5 tomorrow, I would be upset, but it's whatever. If you told me I had to sell my Polo tomorrow, I don't think I could let go of it. I would keep it, carry on driving it, and yeah, it has more meaning to it than just being fast. That's a whole bunch of points relevant to the situation, and yes, I've told you that I think slow cars are absolutely fine as your first cars and you can build that story, but what do I really think you should do if you want to get a fast first car? Now, just because I'm saying that you should go rite of passage and buy a slow car, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should do that. You can do whatever you want, get yourself a nice fast car, and this is what I would suggest if you do. I absolutely hate them, and I always recommend that people don't get them, but if you have to have a black box in your first year on that car, I'm talking if you absolutely have to because it's the way to get your quotes down by like 500, 600 quid per year, then do. And then drive really nice and safe for that first year in that fast car, which will suck. It will be really unenjoyable. You won't be able to drive the car quickly. You'll have you'll get dominated by other 1.2s and 1 litre cars at the line. You'll just feel like, oh, this sucks. But you'll have a much nicer car than your mates. And then in your second year, take the black box out and insure it without one. As long as you've got a good driver rating, generally that insurance price will come so far down. My best mate had a Polo 9N as his first car and it had exactly the same engine in it as my Skoda, and after the first year of our insurance, his dropped massively because he had a black box in his first year. Having taken the black box out after his first year of driving, he was paying about £200 or £300 less annually than I was on my Skoda Fabia estate. And he literally lives like down the road. It's not like a location thing. It's literally because he had that black box in the first year. It brought that price right down. He proved himself as a decent and capable driver, although I'm not sure I'd agree with that. I never did that. I never had a black box, and it meant that my quote stayed generally higher than his for at least 4 years, I would say. So I'd estimate that in those 4 years, I probably spent about £1,000 to £1,000 and a bit more on insurance than he did. So I think long term, and it could actually be quite beneficial for you to get a fast first car, bang in that black box, and then get those cheaper quotes longer term. Anyway, I want to know your thoughts. Should you get a fast first car? Let's have a debate about it down in the comments. As always, a massive thank you to the patrons for their continued support. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.